Welcome. We've got quite a range of topics for today's deep dive, looking at 5 different articles. We'll start with women's nutrition challenges in India, then shift over to India's response to a recent terror attack. After that, we're looking at mineral exploration in Africa.
hmm
There are 3 articles from Zonus on this, so we'll spend a bit more time there. One covers how emotions impact our learning and memory, and the last one digs into the nitrogen cycle. The goal, as always, is to pull out the key insights for you. Let's get started.
Okay, first up is this piece on women's nutrition in India. And it flags up a pretty serious issue right away. Even with economic progress and various government schemes, women and girls are still disproportionately affected by malnutrition compared to men.
Right, the numbers are quite stark, aren't they? It mentions the NFHS 5 data.
Exactly. 57% of women between 15 and 49 are anemic. 57%. Compare that to 26% of men. It's a huge gap, and almost 1 in 5 women are underweight.
And it's striking because, as you said, there are big programs like Poshan Abhiyan. The article mentions a massive allocation, something like 24,000 crore in 2022-23. But then it points out that a lot of that money wasn't even used, only about 69% by December 2022.
Which is worrying in itself. But what's perhaps even more concerning is that despite all this spending, anemia among women actually went up from 53% to 57%.
So the investment isn't translating into results. Why not? What's the article suggests is going wrong?
It seems to point heavily towards deep-seated social issues, cultural norms, particularly in poorer households where women traditionally eat last and, well, they often eat the least.
So it's fundamentally a social justice issue tied to power dynamics within the household.
Precisely. The article links it directly to women's lack of economic independence and decision-making power. It cites that almost half, 49% of women don't control their own earnings. And if you don't control the money, you often can't prioritize your own nutritional needs, you see.
That leads into the idea of empowerment then. The article mentions Nobel laureate Esther Duflo's work.
Yes, and a specific study showing that women who do have independent income are much less likely to be undernourished. It suggests the solution isn't just about providing food, but about enabling women to make their own choices.
It's about agency. But then there's the employment situation. Female labor force participation is up around 33% now, which sounds positive.
It is, on the surface, but the article cautions that a lot of this work is insecure, low-paid. Only 5% are in regularly salary jobs and self-employed women. They earn, on average, 53% less than men. So just having a job doesn't automatically fix the nutrition problem if the pay is low and they still lack control.
So the article argues for more integration, right? This idea of convergence.
Exactly. Getting programs like PUFAN 2.0 to work hand-in-hand with schemes that actually boost women's income and social status. It suggests setting, measurable targets for women's income and decision-making power, breaking down those governmental silos.
And using Anganwadi centers for more than just food.
Yeah, transforming them into hubs. Places for skill training, access to credit, job opportunities, financial literacy. Basically, treating women as active agents in improving their own health, not just passive recipients.
Okay, let's shift gears. The second article tackles India's response to that terror attack in Pahalgam back in April 2025. Operation Sindoor.
Right. This piece lays out the sequence pretty clearly. After the attack, India's first moves weren't military. They reduced diplomatic staff, stopped trade, closed the Wagah-Attari border, canceled visas, even put the Indus Waters Treaty discussions on hold.
But the article stresses these were initial steps, not the full response.
Correct. They were signaling displeasure, but kinetic action was being prepared. This involved careful target selection. 9 targets were chosen and a lot of diplomatic groundwork. The aim was to gain international acceptance, or at least understanding, for India's right to hit terrorist infrastructure while trying very hard to manage escalation. Restore red lines, basically.
In Operation Sindoor itself on May 7th.
India was very clear in its messaging, targeting terrorists, specifically Lati, Hizbul Mujahideen, not the Pakistani military or civilians, and they explicitly reserved the right to retaliate further if attacked.
How did Pakistan react, according to the article?
It was a bit mixed. They acknowledged some strikes, 6 locations, they said. They also claimed to have downed Indian aircraft, which India denied. Publicly, their narrative seemed to be about downplaying the impact and escalating the issue diplomatically, taking it to the UN Security Council.
So things didn't de-escalate immediately, did they?
No. Pakistan's military leadership vowed retaliation. What followed were 2 nights of increased border activity drones, loitering munitions, some missiles fired at about 36 locations. It looked like they were probing India's air defenses.
And India's response to that?
Described as quid pro quo plus. So responding in kind, but also hitting back harder, targeting Pakistani air bases and air defense units. Pakistan denied the intrusions, blamed India. The article also notes the disruption to civilian air traffic and mentions an IMF meeting potentially factoring into calculations.
Then it really ramped up on May 9th and 10th.
Yeah, that was the peak. Pakistan claimed strikes on 26 Indian targets. India acknowledged some limited damage at Air Force stations. India's counter on May 10th was significant. 9 Pakistani military airfields, 3 forward air defense units, reportedly hit with advanced weapons like Scalp and BrahMos. Then came intense diplomacy, leading to a ceasefire late that afternoon.
What about the U.S. role in all this?
It evolved, initially more hands-off, but as escalation risk grew, especially with talk of Pakistan convening its nuclear command authority, U.S. involvement increased. High-level calls. Vance to Modi, Rubio to the Pakistani army chief, and others. Interestingly, Pakistan denied planning an NCA meeting. Then Trump announced the ceasefire, perhaps a bit early.
The article puts this in context of past crises, Kargil, Mumbai, Balakot, where the U.S. was involved but didn't really mediate directly.
Right, and it argues that India needs to keep building its economic and military edge over Pakistan and maintain its own communication lines. It also discusses Pakistan's strategy post-1998, using the nuclear umbrella to try and limit India's conventional options.
But India's responses have been changing that dynamic.
That seems to be the point. Surgical strikes in 2016, using air power in Balakot 2019, and now Operation Sindoor, which expanded the potential target set across Pakistan. This ties into what Prime Minister Modi calls the new normal,
Which is essentially
reiterating India's right to use military force against terror, undeterred by what he termed nuclear blackmail, and crucially, not differentiating between the terrorists, their handlers, or the sponsoring state. It puts the Pakistani military on notice that future responses, maybe in Operation Sindoor 2.0, might not be limited to just terror camps. His quotes about terror and talks and water and blood reinforce this harder line.
But the article concludes with a caveat, right?
Yes. For this new normal to be a credible deterrent, India needs to keep investing in conventional capabilities, air defense suppression, network-centric warfare, and crucially, fix intelligence or security gaps like the one that enabled the Pahalgam attack in the first place.
Okay, let's turn to our first Zonus article. This one's about mineral exploration in Africa. It starts with a kind of paradox, doesn't it?
It does. Africa is incredibly resource-rich, obviously, but its actual share of global spending on exploration has gone down quite a bit since the early 2000s.
That is counterintuitive, but it's not all negative. The DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, is highlighted as a success story, at least for a period.
Yeah, after their civil war ended around 2003, exploration spending surged up nearly 600% between 2005 and 2012, mostly focused on copper. And it paid off, leading to major discoveries like the Kamoa-Kakula complex, which has really high-grade copper ore, shows what sustained exploration in a stable environment can do.
And lithium is another growth area mentioned.
Absolutely. Africa's share of global lithium production is projected to jump massively, like a 5-fold increase by 2027. That's driven by new exploration and getting existing projects up and running, big demand for battery minerals,
But then there's the flip side. Conflict. Mozambique is the example here.
Right. Huge graphite reserves, 3rd largest globally. But the insurgency in Cabo Delgado has hammered exploration. Spending plummeted from over $25 million in 2014 to just over $1 million projected for 2024. A major company even had to declare force majeure on its mine there. Conflict just kills investment.
And political instability is another major deterrent, particularly in the Sahel.
Definitely. Niger saw an almost 90% drop in exploration spending between 2012 and 2024, following repeated coups. It was big for uranium exploration back then. Similar stories in Mali and Burkina Faso after their coups. Exploration spending fell sharply. The article rightly stresses the need for political risk insurance for companies operating there.
It's not just conflict or coups, though. Government policy itself can be a huge factor. Resource nationalism.
Yeah, Tanzania is a case study. Under former President Magufuli, policies were seen as very hostile to mining export bans, challenging contracts. Exploration spending tanked. But under the current president, Samia Hassan, who's taken a different approach, exploration has apparently more than doubled in her first year. Shows how quickly things can turn around with policy shifts.
Zambia had a similar dip in recovery.
Very similar. President Lungu's resource nationalism, higher taxes, royalties caused an 80% drop in exploration spending over about 5 years. His successor, President Hichilema, reversed course, and exploration is bouncing back. It just underscores how critical a stable, predictable policy environment is.
And finally, the demand for rare earths is opening up new areas.
It seems so. Places like Uganda and Malawi, which weren't major exploration hubs before, are seeing big increases in spending focused on rare earth elements. And there's mention of U.S. interest in Angola for processing these materials. So new demands are driving exploration into new frontiers within Africa.
Okay, our second Zonus article delves into something quite different. The link between our emotions and how we learn and remember.
Yes, a really fascinating area. It talks about this interplay between emotion and cognition, how feelings can influence thinking from the bottom up, but also how our thoughts can regulate emotions from the top down. It mentions a framework by Panksepp and Solms, categorizing different levels of emotional processing, primary, secondary, tertiary.
And it introduces a specific brain system, the seeking system.
Right. This system is supposedly key for generating those positive emotional states like curiosity, expectancy, hopefulness that really drive us to explore and learn. They optimize the whole process.
It contrasts this with a cool cognitive system versus a hot emotional system.
Kind of. The cool system, based in the hippocampus, handling more neutral, factual stuff. The hot system, linked to the amygdala, dealing with the emotional charge of experiences. Though the article stresses that while they were once seen as separate, we now know they're deeply integrated. They constantly interact.
So emotions aren't just a reaction after learning. They're actually shaping the learning and memory process itself.
Exactly. They powerfully modify how we appraise information and how memories are formed and stored, especially those long-term memories that depend on the hippocampus.
And the amygdala is key here.
Very key. It processes the arousal aspect of emotion and modulates how memories are encoded and consolidated. That's why emotional events often stick with us more. The amygdala actually works in sync with the hippocampus when we're forming these memories. It's a synergistic relationship.
What about the prefrontal cortex, the PFC?
That comes into play with processing emotional valence, figuring out if something is positive or negative. It interacts with the medial temporal lobe, MTL, where the hippocampus and amygdala are, during both memory encoding and retrieval. Successful long-term memory relies on this interaction. The article even breaks down different parts of the PFC and their specific roles in cognition and emotion.
Does it matter what kind of emotional stimulus it is, like words versus pictures?
It seems to. The amygdala apparently responds strongly regardless of whether the emotion is positive or negative. But studies suggest we're generally more sensitive to emotional pictures than words. Pictures seem to pack more of an immediate emotional punch, you could say.
So what have studies actually found?
A variety of things. Generally, emotional images are remembered better than emotional words. Often, positive emotions stick better than negative ones, though that can vary. Emotional words might be remembered better in recognition tests than pure recall. Sometimes, watching negative film clips can actually hinder recall of other information presented nearby. But arousing films might enhance memory for the context they were seen in. It's complex.
The article also touches on the tools used to study this, right? Brain imaging.
Yes, briefly. fMRI for good spatial detail, seeing where activity happens. PET scans looking at metabolism. EEG for excellent timing, seeing when activity happens. And FNIRS, an emerging technique looking at blood flow changes. These tools help map the brain networks involved in emotional memory.
And it's not just the stimulus or the brain region, but also individual differences.
Absolutely. Your personality, intelligence, sex, hormones, even your age can affect how emotion impacts your memory. Older adults, for instance, sometimes show a positivity bias, remembering positive things better. Also, how emotions are measured in studies' self-assessment scales, the specific tasks used, all these methodological factors matter in the research.
So the big takeaway is
That emotions aren't just noise, they're integral to memory. They influence encoding, consolidation, retrieval. Understanding this interaction better could help improve education, maybe even therapies for conditions like depression or anxiety, which often involve disruptions in emotional processing and memory. That seeking system is vital for getting learning started.
Right. Our final Zonus article brings us back to the environment, the nitrogen cycle. Seems fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental. Nitrogen makes up 78% of our atmosphere. It's a core part of DNA, and crucially, it's essential for plant growth. Our food supply literally depends on it.
But the article stresses balance, right? Too little is bad, too much is also bad.
Exactly. Plants without enough nitrogen get yellow, stunted, produce less. We rely massively on nitrogen fertilizers. The article suggests we might lose a third of our crops without them. But excess nitrogen causes huge problems, particularly water pollution.
Can you elaborate on why it's so essential biologically, beyond just growth?
Well, it's in the very structure of DNA and RNA, carrying genetic code. And plants can't make amino acids without nitrogen. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, essential for structure and function. So no nitrogen, no proteins, no proper growth. The article also notes that too much nitrogen, in certain forms, can be toxic to livestock.
And the main problem with too much nitrogen is this thing called eutrophication.
Yes, that's a major focus. When excess nitrogen, mostly from agricultural fertilizer runoff, gets into rivers, lakes, coastal waters, it acts like a super fertilizer for algae and aquatic plants. You get these massive blooms, phytoplankton blooms.
And the problem isn't the bloom itself, but what happens after.
Precisely. When all that extra plant matter dies, the bacteria decomposing it consume vast amounts of oxygen from the water. This creates hypoxic or anoxic areas, dead zones, where fish and other organisms simply can't survive. The article shows figures illustrating this, using the Potomac River as an example.
Are there ways to deal with eutrophication?
Prevention is best. Reducing fertilizer use, managing runoff better, though tracing the exact source of nitrogen can be tricky. For damage control, algicides are mentioned, but have limitations. They don't fix the root cause and can be expensive. Bioremediation is another approach, trying to manipulate the food web, maybe introducing organisms that eat the excess algae.
This all ties back to the nitrogen cycle itself, how nitrogen moves through the environment.
Yes, the article breaks it down into 5 main stages. Nitrogen needs to change form to be usable by different organisms. You have N2 gas in the atmosphere, nitrogen oxides in soil, ammonia and nitrates in fertilizers in soil.
Okay, what are the 5 stages?
First is nitrogen fixation. That's converting atmospheric N2 gas, which most organisms can't use, into usable forms like ammonia. This happens naturally via lightning or biologically through certain bacteria. Some live freely in soil, others in symbiosis with legume plants like peas and beans, and of course industrially to make fertilizer.
Stage 2.
Mineralization. This is microbes breaking down organic matter, dead plants, animals, manure releasing the nitrogen locked within as inorganic ammonia, NH3. This ammonia then often becomes ammonium, NH4+, in water, which plants can absorb.
Third.
Nitrification. This is a 2-step bacterial process in the soil, converting ammonium first into nitrites, NO2, and then into nitrates, NO3. It needs oxygen. Nitrates are the main form of nitrogen plants take up.
Okay, 4th stage.
Immobilization. This is basically the reverse of mineralization. Soil microbes take up ammonium and nitrates for their own growth, temporarily locking that nitrogen away so plants can't use it. It helps regulate nitrogen levels.
In the final stage.
Denitrification. Here, different bacteria convert nitrates back into nitrogen gas, N2, which returns to the atmosphere. This results in a loss of usable nitrogen from the soil.
So understanding this whole cycle is crucial for farming and preventing pollution.
Absolutely. It helps farmers make better decisions about fertilization, timing, and amounts, hopefully reducing the excess runoff that causes eutrophication. The article also mentions interesting research on using certain plants, like poplar trees or specific grasses, as buffers along waterways to soak up excess nitrates before they reach the water.
So the key message is again about balance and the interconnectedness of these systems.
Definitely. Nitrogen is essential, but excess is polluting. Deficiency limits growth, excess creates dead zones. We need to manage it carefully, and understanding the cycle is the first step. More research is needed, especially on things like those buffer plants for coastal areas.
Thank you for listening. You can give suggestions by contacting our Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about.